2 years been the vice chair of the Kimber board, and for the past 2 years the chair of the Kimber board. So again, I welcome you all. It's a great crowd. We have a great agenda, and I think these next 2 days will be very beneficial to not only the Kimber board, the Kimber members, but also for the vendors and exhibitors who are here. I want to first say all you who attended last year's annual meeting. This hotel does have backup generators, so you will have air conditioning and power. But that didn't stop us last year from having a very successful annual conference. It was just that the hotel was a little difficult to navigate with no lights. But people found that they could sleep in humidity and heat and things like that. I wanted to first off, before the first speaker comes, to take a moment to thank all the speakers who have taken the time to put together a presentation, the exhibitors and the sponsors. We appreciate you coming. We appreciate your financial support that we can pull off a conference like this for the entire state of Pennsylvania, talking about advanced networking and broadband issues, and how do we enhance the overall state of Pennsylvania with respect to advanced networking to support teaching, research, community colleges, public media, healthcare, etc. in the state. And I also want to thank the board members who are here. The Kimber board has been working diligently for the past several years, to make sure this network is up and operational and sustainable in the future. So I just, again, want to thank all the board members for their time and effort here in Harrisburg for the next 2 days. And I'm probably, talking to the choir here, but I think everyone in this room knows that, the creation of Kimber and the Penryn network was really the accumulation of several years, and a lot of people in this room thinking about, the importance of advanced broadband services, to the state of Pennsylvania. And when we came together as a group several years ago to write the grant, the issue of, how do we meet the unmet and underserved populations from a broadband perspective in the state of Pennsylvania. And this network has now been built. We've, even though we're still kind of a startup, 1 year in existence, the network's built, the 1,700 miles of fiber optics across the state of Pennsylvania. And if you look across this room, and if you talk to people in this annual event, you'll see the libraries are here, the healthcare is here, of course the Research One universities, community colleges, K-12. And so, Kimber and Penryn is more than about the fiber across the state and the hubs and the switches. It's really about collaboration. It's about the entire state coming together with a common goal and a common good, which is education, research, economic development. And there are many opportunities for growth in this network, and benefits, positive externalities to this network. And I always have two stories that I tell. Roy Brewer's here from Lehigh, so he's say, oh, here he goes with the story. But we have a number of resources at Lehigh that are network accessible. One is an earthquake simulation, large structure research facility. The other is one of the largest presence of scanning electron microscopes. So all these resources are there, and we need more advanced broadband, and we need advanced bandwidth. And we've had to, in the past couple of years, go after some federal grants. And we've been successful on $3 million in National Science Foundation grant funding. One was academic research infrastructure, and the other was campus cyber infrastructure. And in each of those proposals, I was questioned about our capacity to fulfill the obligations of the grant, to implement the grant on campus. And in our application, we mentioned Penryn and we mentioned Kimber, and both program officers for the National Science Foundation asked me about the role of Lehigh with Kimber and Penryn. And it was really a synergistic relationship between, Lehigh, Kimber, and Penryn, and getting the actual $3 million in grants. So there's a lot more currently and a lot more in the future of Kimber Penryn than just creating the network. And that's why we're all here, to discuss and hear about the different applications for advanced networking in Pennsylvania. So with that said, I would like at this time to introduce an individual who has been an advocate for using technology in the state of Pennsylvania. His name is Nathan Silcox, and he's the prior Executive Director for the Pennsylvania State Communications and Technology Committee. Nathan.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Taggart, and thank you, Patty Campbell, and the rest of Kimber for inviting me to be with you this morning. And on behalf of Senator Randy Volokovich, welcome to Harrisburg. And as Dr. Taggart noted, I am the former Executive Director of the Senate Communications and Technology Committee. Just like in technology, with life, if you don't embrace change, it passes you by. So recently the Senate had some shake-ups in the leadership of the committees. Senator Randy Volokovich, who I work for, is now the chairman of the Senate Aging and Youth Committee. And meanwhile, Senator Scott Hutchinson is the new chairman of the Senate Communications and Technology Committee. And with us today is the new executive director of the committee, Justin Levenfield. If you want to wave your hand, Justin. So, we'd like to welcome Senator Hutchinson to chair this committee. He is from Oil City, Venango County, up in the northwest of Pennsylvania. He was recently elected to the Pennsylvania Senate in 2012. And he is a past member of the Pennsylvania House from 1992 to 2012, and he was the previous chairman of the Senate Intergovernmental Operations Committee. So I'd like to thank you at Kimber for welcoming Senator Volokovich. He was just chairman of the committee since 2013, so a little over a year and a half. He's been the chairman of the committee. It's been a learning process both for him and myself, and just as we get our arms around it, we get a little bit of change. But I think you'll be well served with Justin, and I know he'll appreciate getting to know you as well, Senator Hutchinson. A little bit of background, a little one-on-one on the Senate Communications and Technology Committee. It was formed 21 years ago. It was originally the Senate Communications and High Technology Committee. It was charged, the initial charge that was dealing with telecommunications in Chapter 30, the initial right of that. But now that's gone away too. Change is taking place at the Senate Consumer Protection and Professional Licensure Committee has taken over Chapter 30. But the committee itself, Communications and Technology, has evolved over the years. We've dealt with a number of issues. The 911 system for cell phones, the Pennsylvania Public Telephone Network, cybersecurity, biotech research centers, computer data theft, identity theft, dual party relay service, Telecommunications Device Distribution Program Act, spyware, data breaches, voice over the internet protocol, phishing, internet advertising by local governments, broadband deployment, real ID, and finally the Pennsylvania eHealth Partnership Act was established in 2012 and is now taking place, much like Kimber is now getting its legs. And over the course of this session, Senator Volokovich, as chairman of the committee, has put forth a couple of initiatives. Senate Bill 24 was recently passed into law. That was a part of our Senate child protection package. This legislation establishes a statewide database for protected services. So it's a clearinghouse that will allow the Department of Public Welfare and various state agencies to provide and share information electronically in regards to child abuse. Senate Bill 114 was passed by the Senate and is now in the House. That would amend our state's Breach of Personal Information Notification Act, basically setting timeframes for which state agencies and local governments need to notify law enforcement when there is a data breach, as well as notifying the public within a timely manner. Just recently, the Senate Communications and Technology Committee, as well as the Senate, passed Senate Bill 1290. That's the Kelsey-Smith Act. Basically, it requires cell phone providers to ping a cell phone for law enforcement when there's a real emergency. There's either the threat of death or imminent danger to an individual. So law enforcement is able to contact the cell phone provider and ping the cell phone and hopefully locate an individual that's in danger. It was named after an 18-year-old Kansas woman who was abducted and killed, and her parents have proceeded with passing laws nationally require this expedited fashion of notifying cell phone providers. Another conversation we started in the Senate Communications and Technology Committee is on the statewide radio system. It's been around since the 90s during the Governor Bridges administration. It's now under the auspices of the state police. But Senator Volokovich and a couple of other committee chairmen had a joint hearing this past year in terms of where we're headed on that front, and there's a conversation ongoing with the Corbett administration in order to provide a statewide radio system that's seamless, from statewide down to local, as well as to watch out for the costs that we're not duplicating expenditures on that front. And finally, during this budget process, which we're currently going through, we're hopeful to pass a budget on time in the Commonwealth by July 1st. But one of Senator Volokovich's charges as chairman of the committee has been to look at the money and where it's being spent. And state agencies, there's a lot of money being spent on technology. He's making sure that he's doing his best to make sure it's being spent wisely. The Auditor General came in last year. New Auditor General wanted to spend basically about $9 million on new technology. And after Senator Volokovich got involved in working with the Corbett administration and the Office of Administration, we're able to pare that down to $2 million. And the Auditor General is happy with the expenditures that he got because it's what he needed, not just what he wanted. So we're hopeful that we're able to make an impact with that going forward. And that brings us a little bit to Kimber. I know that originally with Kimber receiving federal stimulus dollars, there's some question about whether that was the right use of funds, but for federal stimulus dollars for the creation of a new broadband network. But the truth is, Kimber's here, Kimber's in operation, and we certainly appreciate what it's doing. And now it's time to talk about sustainability in the future of Kimber and this project. And as Dr. Taggart noted, we're looking at federal grants and additional dollars to sustain and grow the program. So I wish you the best of luck in that regard. In terms of broadband networks, it's limitless, and most of us in the room, I'm sure, I'm speaking to the choir as well. In terms of education and libraries, it's very important. The connectivity there to the parents, and I'm a parent of a young child who just recently paid attention that his that my kid's mom is getting their books over the internet. So it's they're not. She says, "Do you want another book from the library?" And, I'm looking around for these books, and they're on the Kindle or they're on the iPad. So that's just that's skimming the top of the surface in terms of education. Healthcare, Senator Volokovich has been very interested in this regard. Telemedicine. Early when he became chairman of the committee, he toured UPMC out in Pittsburgh and was able to view telemedicine being conducted down in Brazil, and it's fascinating to him. And what we're doing with the Pennsylvania eHealth Partnership Authority and eHealth records, it's amazing on that front. Also economic development, broadband can promote economic development and revitalization through electronic commerce, creating new jobs, attracting new industries, providing access to regional, national, worldwide markets. And there are a lot of you involved in that effort, and it's very exciting. So, and finally, public safety and emergency management. I touched on a little bit with the statewide radio system, and that's also part of Kimber's charge. So I recognize there's a lot of potential here, and I wish Kimber the best as we move forward. Wish you the best in this conference. Again, I thank you for your hospitality for Senator Volokovich as the past chairman of this committee, and I know I'll even give the same combination to Senator Hutchinson. Thank you very much.
Dave, thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to go over the development of our search for a new executive director for Kimber and Penryn. I think everyone knows in this room that last summer the board began a national search for an executive director who had strong leadership skills and a background in managing, statewide research and education network. We did a national search. This was a lot of effort and a lot of time by the board. And one board member in particular Jinx Walton, who is the vice chair of the Kimber board, soon to be chair. Jinx, if you want to stand up, I want to give you a little shout out for all of her effort. Jinx is the University of Pittsburgh CIO, and she led the effort to recruit our executive director, Wendy Huntoon. Jinx, as I said, becomes the chair as of June, July of this year, so good luck, Jinx. And also, I wanted to do a little shout out to the workforce committee, because anytime you do a national search, all of you in the room who have done searches, not only do you have your day job, but this consumes an awful lot of time. And it was an extensive search with a lot of effort, so again, to all the board members who are on the workforce committee, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's now my pleasure and honor to give you a little background to Wendy Huntoon, who's our new executive director. Before joining Kimber, Wendy served as Director of Advanced Networking at the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center, a research department of Carnegie Mellon University, where she provided the overall leadership, management, and administrative support for all of PSC's production and research network infrastructure and technologies. In this role, she oversaw the Three Rocks, or the Three Rivers Optical Exchange, a high-speed network hub, which was PSC's networking group, provides high-performance networking for research and education for 18 organizations. Since 2011, she has also served as the Senior Director for Research and Science Engagement for the Chief Technology Officer at Internet2, where she was responsible for developing programs for providing direct support for the national research community. Previously, she also served as Director of Operations for the National Lambda Rail from 2005 to 2009, and she was the first Executive Director of the Quilt, where she grew the organization to more than 25 advanced regional network organizations with projects in the areas of commodity internet service, regional peering, and fiber optical networks. So, with that background, clearly it is my pleasure, and join me in welcoming Kimber's Executive Director, Wendy Huntoon.
It's a real pleasure to be here. So first, I'd like to thank a number of other people before I give a brief presentation on just some of the things that we're doing at Kimber. And first, I'd like to say I'm in month 3. So now I'm no longer talking about the number of days I've been in the job. I'm now into the number of months. And so that's pretty exciting. So first, I'd like to thank the board. Day 11 of my job here at Kimber, I had my first board meeting. The board was very receptive and welcoming. I actually ended on time, which I think they appreciated it as well. So I just want to say my thanks to the board and the support that they provided in my first 3 months here at Kimber. I'd also like to say thank you to the staff. It has been an interesting transition year for Kimber. And the staff has really put in a tremendous amount of effort, not just for this meeting, but in general for the organization. Without the staff for Kimber, we just wouldn't be here today. I want to put a specific shout out to Patty Campbell, who has organized the annual meeting. When I came on back in February, most of the plans for the meeting were already done, and I just, went with the flow. So thank you, Patty, for putting on a fantastic meeting. I think when I talked to folks this morning, I think we have somewhere between 250 to 275 people registered for the meeting. So I think that shows how compelling broadband connectivity is in the state of Pennsylvania. I'd also like to thank our sponsors. We have a number of sponsors this year. It's really grown over the past year from last year. So our platinum sponsors are Copper River Information Technology, InfoBlocks, and Integration Partners. Our gold sponsors, Our gold sponsors are ADFA and Juniper Networks. Our silver sponsors are Connex, FiberTech, Iron Mountain, Network, Utility Force, Synesis, Walker and Associates, and Exxon. Many of these sponsors have tables out in the foyer, so I really encourage you to stop by and talk to them. And I think, as I'll talk about a little bit later in my presentation, it's a really good example of the public-private partnerships that we have going on. So while we have been funded by federal funds, without the collaboration of these commercial partners, we would not be as successful as we have been so far. So one of the things, I just want to talk a little bit about my background and my expectations and plans for Kimber. So when I joined the team in February, I shared with the staff that I had left a wonderful position, actually 25 years at Carnegie Mellon University. So I do want to also give a shout out to some of my colleagues from PSC and Three Rocks are here, so Michael Lambert and Ken Goodwin, who have put up with me for almost the full past 25 years. Don't believe a word they say about staff management and expectations in terms of time commitments. They're really not telling the truth. But I left a fantastic job, both at the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center as well as Internet 2, to take on Kimber, because regional networking has been my passion. It's been my passion since I joined PSC 25 years ago. And in fact, I collaborated back in the early 90s with many of the people who are currently on the Kimber board for the previous regional network here in Pennsylvania called PrepNet, the Pennsylvania Regional and Education Partnership Network. That network was actually sold to Vario in about 1997 and shows how successful regional networks were back in the 90s, not just here in Pennsylvania, but statewide. So Kimber is really a passion. After PrepNet was sold to Vario, a number of us continued to meet to actually talk about putting together another regional network. We had networks along the sides of Pennsylvania, so we had Magpie and Drexel in eastern Pennsylvania, and the Three Rivers Optical Exchange, which I ran when I was at PSC, western Pennsylvania, but the middle part of Pennsylvania was sort of left out of that. In the days of PrepNet, almost all of the nonprofit organizations, as well as commercial organizations, actually connected to PrepNet. And when PrepNet was sold, many groups continued to purchase commodity internet service from Vario, but a number of the universities actually went to Magpie, Drexel, or Three Rocks. So a group of us, Greg Palmer, myself, Gary Augustin, who was the CIO at Penn State at the time, we would come up to Harrisburg, to the Hilton, and go to talk to people at the state, whether it was the Department of Education or various representatives and senators, about forming another statewide regional education network. So in 2009, when the VTOP funds became available, George Loftus, who's now with Internet 2, was at Ocean in Rhode Island at the time, mentioned on a cold call that there were these funds available to do regional networks. So a group of us got together and decided we would take the presentation that we had used the previous 10 years and actually use that as the core of what became Kimber. We thought that we submitted a grant for $99.6 million. We had no idea that we would actually get the money, but we did. We were told sort of behind the scenes that we should have asked for more. Our grant actually became the prototype for the next round of NTIA grants. People told us that what we proposed of pulling the community together was really very forward-thinking in what we were trying to do, and was a model for other organizations nationwide. So that's what we're building upon. So in the past 3 years, while I've not been part of Kimber, I've been on the side. This is my role at the Supercomputing Center. I've watched this wonderful infrastructure get built. 1,600 miles of fiber. We'll talk a little bit later on about how many people that we have connected, but that provides the core of what we're going to do going forward. And it's not just network infrastructure, it's the ability to collaborate and to actually get things done. It's what we can do as a state with unconstrained bandwidth. And we need to think of it in that respect. That it's, as I've gone around listening and talking to people in the past 3 months, I realized a lot of people have decided what they can do within their organization based on how much bandwidth they can afford. And we have to change the discussion and talk about what people need to do and what their requirements are so that they can actually get their work done and not think about what the cost is on a per megabit basis or that they can only afford a certain amount of bandwidth. So I want to give just a couple of examples, and Bruce did talk about a few things that I've done in the past. So as the first executive director for the Quilt, we did form this commodity internet service project that drove down the cost of commercial internet service substantially. Back when we started it, the cost of internet connectivity was probably on the order of $300 per megabit. It was, outrageously expensive. Now you can get commercial internet service at under $10 or $5 a megabit. One of the things we did within the consortium, we purchased together, we aggregated our bandwidth, and we found that that was a great model for the commercial internet providers. It's another example of public-private partnerships, because we ended up really partnering with these commercial internet service providers. They just weren't a vendor that we were purchasing with. They became a partner in figuring out how to deliver quality service, especially to the higher ed community. And it wasn't just about price, it also improved the quality of support for the commercial internet service nationwide. Many of us have very good network engineering backgrounds. We hated when we called the internet service provider and we got their tier 1 support. And what we ended up doing is being able to go in at a higher level so that we could actually tell them what was wrong with the network and they could fix it. So it improved the level of support we got and allowed people to really integrate this network infrastructure into mission-critical applications. At the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center, with funding from the National Science Foundation, and again in collaboration with commercial partners, we developed network standards for improving end-to-end performance that are now part of the standard operating systems that you have on your laptops. Again, it took a while. Some of these projects started in the late 90s, and to actually have an impact on the operating system that you have on your laptop, you have to go into the standards community, and they have to be adopted by multiple operating system providers. So we actually had that impact. So you actually use on the computer that you have at home software and standards that was developed by my group at the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center. Recently, in my role at Internet 2, I helped drive the adoption of innovative technologies, including 100 gigabit Ethernet, as well as software-defined networking, 2 topics that we'll hear about during the session the next 2 days, both into regional networks as well as campus infrastructure. And this included the development of new software-defined network-based applications by 7 university teams, one which included my daughter out of Georgia Tech, through the Innovation Application Awards contest. I must say, it was one of the most exciting things I did, both at Internet 2 and in my career, to actually work with these student teams, undergraduates and graduates, who were taking a brand new technology, deploying it on the national backbone, actually telling the network engineers what was wrong with the national network infrastructure at times, and coming up with new innovative applications. I think that provides a model for something that we can do here in Pennsylvania as well, in collaboration with the universities, as well as with some of our commercial partners. As I mentioned before, public-private partnerships are very important, and the regional networks are prime examples of successful public-private partnerships. PENRA, the Pennsylvania Regional and Education Network, is a great example of that. Our key partners include public and private universities, healthcare, K-12. We pulled together to apply for the NTIA grant, as I mentioned, and was awarded the $99.6 million. One of our important partners there was Synesis. Synesis was our partner in building the infrastructure. Many of the people around the table in the community that actually wrote the grant, we had no experience building a fiber-based network. So without Synesis's partnership, we would not have been successful in building 1,600 miles of fiber optic network within Pennsylvania. I must say, now that I'm the executive director at Kimber, whenever I'm in an area where I know that there is fiber, I look up at the poles to see if I can actually see my fiber. I've talked to other people on the staff, and they do that as well. None of us have gotten into accidents that we have to be very careful about. I also know a lot more about pole attachments than I ever knew before. And again, without Synesis's expert help in this, we would not have been able to get this done. So that's just the beginning of our partnership with Synesis. It's important we'll be working with them for the next 20, 40, 60 years, as long as the fiber is viable, understanding how we can utilize that fiber to deploy broadband-based connectivity within the state of Pennsylvania. So today, Kimber is poised and ready to offer a number of opportunities. Kimber is growing. Last year at this time, we had 13 organizations connected to Penryn and using Kimber services. Now we have more than 30, with more signing up on a daily basis. We have 5 contracts that are signed and in place, and we're just waiting to turn on those sites to connect them to the network. We have a number of other groups that we're in discussions with contracts under review. So we see that there's a real demand for the services that we have. We have currently 20 gigabits of commodity connectivity, and we're looking at expanding that. We have 10 gigs from Cogent out of Philadelphia, as well as 10 from Pittsburgh. One of the things, given that Pennsylvania is such a large state, we find that we need very good redundant connectivity, and are working with a number of groups to do that. In the first 3 months that I've been here at Kimber, we've gotten a lot accomplished. We submitted a letter of interest to the Connect America Fund. We will hear about that in May. We submitted a letter of interest for $40 million to do some additional builds, fiber builds within some of the rural counties in Pennsylvania to connect up libraries and other organizations. Right now, it's just a letter of interest. What we hope is that there will actually be a solicitation that comes out sometime in the May timeframe, and that we'll be submitting, and again, partnering with some of the groups that are already around the table, as well as some new groups. In addition, we provided support for the National Science Foundation Campus Cyber Infrastructure Innovation and Engineering Program. We submitted a grant for $150,000 as well as supporting a number of our members in terms of submitting a grant. This program, which is called the CCIIE, Bruce Taggart already talked about how Lehigh received a grant from that in the previous round. The University of Pennsylvania, Penn State University, Carnegie Mellon University, the Pittsburgh Computing Center also received grants in the previous round. One of the things in the current round that is of significant interest to the National Science Foundation is actually encouraging small universities and colleges to apply to this money. So in this current round, there was up to $350,000 that was available to the small universities. And so what we did is we encouraged the small universities to apply to that. We provided them proposal help. We provided letters of interest. In my previous role at Internet 2, I was one of the recipients of the Broadening the Reach funding from the National Science Foundation that actually put together workshops to talk to small colleges and universities on the proposal writing process, as well as how to actually integrate cyber infrastructure into their campus infrastructure. I was able to leverage that again within the first few weeks that I was here at Kimber to actually provide that information to the small colleges and universities. One of the things that Bruce mentioned earlier, I have a pretty strong record in terms of funding from the National Science Foundation. So I bring that expertise here at Kimber as well. I actually, when I left Carnegie Mellon University, I had to give up all my funding. I received 4 grants from the NSF last year, and so to leave that and make a fresh start here at Kimber, it was a little difficult, but it's also exciting because I think we now have that opportunity here at Kimber, and other organizations within Pennsylvania can benefit from my expertise and our staff's expertise in that area. So I want to talk about our long-term strategy and growth, and that really goes to the long-term sustainability of Kimber. A lot of people will ask about that, is what are our plans going forward and how are we going to ensure sustainability. And from my perspective, that really talks about what our strategy is going forward. I think today's meeting is a good example of the level of interest and the level of commitment Pennsylvania has for what we're trying to do. So here are some of the next steps for Kimber and Penryn. So continued enhancements of the network. As a network engineer, I love infrastructure. I understand that now my role is bigger than that, and nobody lets me touch the equipment anymore. We used to always joke I would get passwords for the hardware, but they didn't actually work because nobody on the staff actually wants me reconfiguring one of their routers. So some of the things that we've done, we have regional connections. We began pairing with the PAIUnet and ChescoNet, the Chester County Network, in November of 2013. So that provides better access to the K-12 community within the state. Our session entitled Globally Connected, Locally Envisioned Collaborative Learning, which is held on Thursday at 10:45, will give you insight into how one of the IUs the Allegheny Intermediate Unit uses technology to advance hybrid education programs. I'll just say as an aside, K-12 education is a real passion of mine. Recently, 2 years ago, I ran for election for a local school board, and so I'm a school board member at Chartiers Valley School District. I must say that's a pretty exciting endeavor. We connected with Magpie, Drexel, and Three Rocks, the other regional networks within Pennsylvania, at either 1 gigabit or 10 gigabit, and that includes exchanging member routes with the Workers Optical Exchange. We look to continue enhancements, including connecting to and pairing with neighboring regional networks over the next year. Many of the regional networks actually have connectivity into Pennsylvania, and so what we want to do is we want to leverage that. And here with WVNet from West Virginia, or Net in Ohio, Three Rocks already peers with them, NJ Edge from New Jersey and Delaware on the eastern part of Pennsylvania, Magpie already peers with those, and so we hope to actually foster collaboration within all the regional networks in this area, since we do have the cross-state connectivity throughout Pennsylvania. We're in the process of completing our third 10 gigabit wave across the Penrith backbone, forming a 30 gigabit backbone. Another thing that we're looking at is supporting above the net or content services. So again, we talk about network connectivity a lot, but it's really about the applications and what is enabled on this network. So Merit's Network Professional Learning, we have a marketing partnership with that program. It's a series of 4 classroom-based online professional development sessions like the cybersecurity range, and includes certification opportunities. We have a special price for Kimber organizations. This partnership is available whether you're connected to Kimber or not. So that's another thing that you're going to see. We will talk about connected and not yet connected organizations, and many of the opportunities that Kimber offers does not require you to have a connection yet to Penrith. Obviously, that's the ultimate goal, but again, it's about collaboration and enabling services throughout Pennsylvania. NJ Edge, which is provided by the regional network in New Jersey, has the NJ Edge video services. So NJ Vid is a statewide academic video on-demand repository that provides lectures on demand, licensed commercial videos, as well as locally owned videos. A video commons collection is publicly available, including history, lectures, and notables, and video documenting research and scientific advances. This service is widely used nationwide. It's very popular in the K-12 and the higher ed community, and so that's a service that we'll be offering as well through Kimber and Magpie. The Magpie educational services, they're available for people both on net and off net. Examples include educators for the younger grades can actually leverage Magpie's content-based offerings that use the Philadelphia Museum of Art's children's book, Art Museum Opposites, as a springboard for talking about art and comparing and contrasting, and elaborates on the work featured in the book through games, activities, and additional images and works. Another project that Magpie did this past year was actually a collaboration with the National Park Service, and it was a live reading of the Gettysburg Address. And we had a couple of school districts within Pennsylvania that actually used that and integrated that into their curriculum. Finally, I just want to mention the XAN pilot project. This is a collaboration between Kimber and XAN. We're looking initially at a pilot partnership that's aimed at delivering enterprise-class technology infrastructure services, including off-site data storage with automatic backup, private cloud services, including co-location, hosted application services, and disaster recovery. We're looking for a couple of organizations that are currently on net to participate in the pilot program so that we can understand how to deliver these services and how to use the Penrith infrastructure to do that. And then once we understand the right format for this partnership with these services, we'll offer these services to Kimber at a discounted rate. So a little bit more about the network infrastructure. So we foster collaboration, or forum for collaboration and mechanisms for support. So we'll talk about technical support. We offered webinars on the GR NOC, the help desk, and the Network Operations Center for Penrith. We we offered this webinar on the GRNOC tools that you can use. We have some additional training sessions that are being offered on Thursday afternoon after the conference. They include a software-defined networking training and the fiber boot camp. And one of the things that's interesting, I have people say, well, why do I care about software-defined networking? And even though many of us aren't actually using it in our network right now, one of the things that we see is that this is really the wave of the future. We see that this is already being deployed by, say, Google in their data centers. They actually use software-defined networking to determine how they're going to route their traffic between those servers. We think that this is going to be a real feature for campus networks going forward, as well as for some commercial services in the future as well. So while it's not something that we all use in our day-to-day life today, it's something to get familiar with and understand how to integrate it into our applications. Support for researchers. I'm sure you all know I'm very passionate about this. At the Pittsburgh Supercomputing Center, we learned that it wasn't about networking, it was about supporting the people who were using the network. Networking was actually sort of a dirty word to our center directors, Michael Hahn and Ralph Roski. So we learned to talk about how it would enable scientific applications. So one of the things, again, we want to make sure we do here in Pennsylvania is offer that level of support for all the researchers statewide. Support for community and economic development. We have a number of community examples, something that the Kimber staff is very passionate about. And one of the real missions associated with Kimber. In Huntington County, there's a discussion about the successes at the 11:30 session today. We're actually looking at putting a machine room on that. Lancaster, you can learn about the coalescing of community resources at 2:45 this afternoon. In Lancaster, they're looking at leveraging the network connection that we have at Franklin and Marshall University to actually provide broadband connectivity throughout the county. These are just a couple of examples, and I'm sure that in the hallway discussions today and tomorrow, we'll hear about a lot more. Regional national collaborations. Tomorrow, our plenary speaker is Dave Lambert, who is the CEO of Internet 2, and actually, so I have worked with since the early 90s. He was actually at the Cornell Supercomputing Center. It was actually the Cornell Theory Center in the early 1990s. So he's going to come and talk about innovation, transformation, and community and some of the initiatives that Internet 2 has. Pankaj Shah, the Ohio Supercomputing Center in Ornat, the Ohio Academic Resources Network, is giving the closing plenary tomorrow. He'll talk about initiatives in Ohio, including funding that they've received from the state, which included roughly $11 million to actually deploy 100 gig backbone within the state of Ohio, and how that infrastructure is being used, both for the higher education as well as economic development. Another thing that we're working on is the quote In-Common pilot. There are already over 25 In-Common members within Pennsylvania, many of which who aren't connected yet to Penred or Internet 2. We're working on this In-Common pilot program, which investigates ways in which regional network organizations such as Kimber can aggregate the support and costs associated with participation, reducing the barriers of entry for a broad set of organizations within Pennsylvania. We've seen that In-Common can really enable organizations, not just higher ed, but it's also available for K-12 and other organizations, to actually put together a trust fabric so that you can confidently use cloud-based services. Another thing that we're looking at is the Internet 2 Net Plus Regional Partner Program. A number of the Internet 2 members within Pennsylvania, Penn State is a great example, are already using these services. At last week's Internet 2 Global Summit, they announced the expansion of its Net Plus Regional Partner Program. And many of you heard Shel Wagner from Internet 2 talk about Net Plus last year at the annual meeting. So the Net Plus Regional Partner Program expands access to Internet 2's integrated portfolio of cloud and trust solutions, contains both commercial services as well as community offerings. It's also an opportunity for us within Pennsylvania to offer these services to the national community as well. So examples include AWS, Box, and voice over IP services. So I know that's a lot to take in. You can all tell I'm pretty animated, so you should stop me in the hall and talk to me about some of these initiatives that we're working on. I encourage you to stop and talk to the rest of the staff as well about what they're talking about what they're working on, and some of the initiatives that they're passionate about. As I noted in my introduction, by working together, our Kimber community has a tremendous opportunity for innovation that will benefit all of us. From K-12 school districts who are starting to leverage more network-based resources to researchers who are developing new genomics applications, organizations now have more options and access to technology than any time in our history. This conference offers our community a forum for meaningful discourse and opportunities to learn from national experts as well as each other. I encourage you to take advantage of the sessions, trainings, and time together. And I want to thank you all for coming. It's great to see so many people in the room. Both people I've known over the past 25 years, as well as a number of people I'm looking forward to meeting and getting to know. So thank you for coming, and at this time I'll open it up for any questions you may have. Don't be shy. And there are mics in the middle of the room. All right. Well, then, I think we're good. And again, if you have any questions or comments, just feel free to stop me over the next 2 days. Thank you very much.